Welcome back everyone to a video on Ancestor's Legacy. This is, well, I'm actually recording the audio after the game, but this is the first game I ever played in this new RTS, and it is a, for now, multiplayer only. It's an RTS set in the early medieval period, very much 10th century is what it seems like they say, though there's a few things that are weird about that, and I'll explain it later. And it is focused on multiplayer, though they are saying it's going to have a single-player campaign. And yeah, so this is just going to be my first look. To be completely honest, I've only played one game because I've only had really time to play with that. And yeah, this is my first game. I'm recording the audio after that. Now, how the game works is that you start out with your village and you recruit your units off of that. You have essentially basic tiers and later tiers of different kinds of units like ranged infantry and all of that. And then you capture around the map these villages, as you can see, and they give you extra resources, and they also are the ones that, if you can see in the top bar, that's essentially like the victory points, I guess you could say. And it works that the people who have more villages under their control are going to have more VPs. VP gain, and so that's how you get the win. And I believe this is domination. It's called domination game mode or something like that. Anyway, so the way it works, as you can see, is that you have squads of units that you move around, and this is like something that's a little bit weird to me because, as you can see, the maps are rather small. The line of sight is very small, and so just right off the bat, this gave me a bit of a feel like this was kind of one of those semi-MOBAs, semi-RTS kind of games that are running around the market right now. Like Dawn of War 3, which is infamously pretty bad. I really don't like it. And so it's just kind of already kind of left a pretty bad taste in my mouth. Anyway, I did push in and try to see how the game actually is. And well, I'm playing right now as the Anglo-Saxons, I believe. I say I believe because I got autofilled. Well, not autofilled, but random, like the army was chosen randomly for me. And yeah. So the way it works is that you recruit these units by essentially upgrading your town with different buildings. You get archery range, barracks, and then those are the ones that recruit actual units. And then you have different buildings that get you upgrades, like for example blacksmiths and all of that. And then you upgrade your technology tiers at the, I guess you could, I'm just gonna call it HQ, which is called, I do not know, I do not see the name of that, but still, at the HQ, you upgrade your technology tier, and you can get more advanced units. That's the basic premise of how it works. There's free resources, there's wood, food, and iron, or I guess you could say steel. And they're all used for different things, although it seems like wood is really the most important one. It's a bit like manpower in Company of Heroes, because you just need wood for everything. You need wood for buildings, you need wood for upgrades, you need wood for units. And to upgrade your unit capacity, you need to build houses. And all of that makes your main base. Of course, you also have those villages, as you can see down the map. This is a free map, so it's rather big. And those villages that you can capture then can get upgraded with defenses, mines, and wood logging camps and farms, so that they can extract resources for you. As you can see, I finally find an enemy unit. These are some cleaver infantry, and I set my slingers to fire on them, but their range is pretty bad. And so there, as you can see, I just use the retreat button, which is basically like in Company of Heroes, except a lot of these units are melee, of course, because this is supposed to be a medieval setting. So it's actually rather easy to retreat out of the fight, unless you're fighting certain kinds of players that you'll see. Certain like units have a way of like pinning you down and preventing you from retreating. And I'm trying to support my allies over here. One thing that I want to try is the game in 1v1, because, well, it seems like the team game kind of structure makes it a lot more dependent on how you can coordinate with your allies rather than anything else. Because you're always going to be outnumbered. So I built a siege weapon, a ballista, and it said it was effective against infantry, and it seems from that interface to work essentially like a machine gun from Company of Heroes. The whole game to me feels like it was supposed to be some kind of medieval Company of Heroes, as weird as that sounds. But to be honest, it does not really feel like that. I think it feels more like a medieval Dawn of War 3, which is my really biggest gripe. It's just, it feels like a sort of a cross between a MOBA and an RTS that's not really working, at least for me, for what I like, you know, my RTSs to be. I like the RTS sort of genre to be a little bit more deliberate in its play. Like, I don't exactly like fast-paced, frenetic sort of RTS. Another thing that I dislike about the game is the way the line of sight system works. As you can see, there's like these cloud effects overhead. I think that's supposed to be clouds. Like, I think that my units over there can actually see there. It's just, it looks like it's in the fog of war because there's clouds overhead. That's something that pisses me off. And then some cleaver infantry just kind of moved through and killed them. Then I set up my ballista and tried to use it, but it doesn't really seem like it's gonna work. Doesn't really seem like it's gonna work. Like, as you can see, those guys are there. They hit one of my traps that I laid down, and they take a lot of damage. Then my ally comes in with his own infantry, and that's gonna do some good things. One thing that I like is that there's friendly fire. As you can see, if you're gonna fire at your yeah, I almost basically destroy my allies' infantry squad. If you're gonna shoot, you're gonna need to pay attention to like the directional direction you're gonna be shooting into. So you may have your units firing on your allies, and that's, I guess, nice. It just gets more options open. And I didn't know, by the way, that that existed before then because I hadn't even gotten into combat yet. That's another thing. The game is, for the way the line of sight works, I think, that's just kind of the reason I was able to gather up. For the way the line of sight works and the way the unit, I guess you could say unit preservation mechanics and the unit building mechanics, like, you don't, as you can see, I've only got 3 squads and we're 7 minutes into the game. Because of all these things summed up, you don't really see a lot of fighting, to be completely honest. The way you end up fighting it, and that's what is my ballista doing? I don't know. The way you end up fighting is relatively, like, yeah, as you can see, you just get ambushed and you either win or you lose, and then you retreat. Unfortunately, my ballista cannot retreat. It tries to set up, but it does not see those enemies. Then they make themselves known. My ballista does not fire for some reason. I guess the reload mechanics prevented it from doing that. And the ballista cannot retreat because, of course, it's a weapon, so it's just gonna stand there and probably die. Although, as you can see, it's actually doing some surprising damage to those spearmen, which is fine, but then eventually they die, and as you can see, they're already out of line of sight, which really pisses me off, because the way combat just seems to work is that every once in a while you move up and you try to fight, then you see combat for a couple of seconds, really, and then it's all over. You don't really have a sense of progression of the fights, you don't really have a sense of, like, once a fight starts, you don't really have a way of turning it around, I guess you could say. In the early game, that is to say. In the late game, it's different. You'll see. But still, this kind of early game skirmishing doesn't really give you a lot of interactive options. It doesn't really give you, at least from what I like about RTS, doesn't really give you a lot of fun. So now I'm checking up and trying to get my longbowman. As you can see, the different tabs over there, they're not like in Company of Heroes, different buildings where you get several different units that have different things that they can do. No, it's just one tab is for units, then one tab is for buildings, and then another tab is for upgrades. And then the last tab, the one with the cross, is for the church. Although, what's kind of weird is that I'm playing as the Anglo-Saxons. Like, these guys are not really supposed to be Christians, are they? Like, this is supposed to be set in the 10th century. So it's kind of weird. kind of weird indeed.
Over there! Slingers!
And yeah, so I've got my longbowmen, I've got my slingers. Also, it doesn't seem like there's really any music, but it might have been because I turned it down too much. My ally is moving across the bridge, which is a bad idea. You saw earlier you can place down these traps, right? And that makes pushing a relatively bad idea, surprisingly. After a few minutes of everyone just kind of skirmishing, posturing for the villages, once you have your sort of front lines established, pushing up is very hard because there's so many ways in which you can hide units around. There's so many, I guess, choke points also in the map, because it may look like the center is one big battleground, one big arena, but if you saw there's like these canyons that make you funneled into one section or another. So it's very easy to set up ambushes and fort big pushes. So that's one other problem that I have, is that once again, it kind of fits the whole mold of the MOBAs in that you're forced into a lane, and then you have to be very careful with how you move into that lane, because there's bushes that you can hide in, and by now all these are like the cliches, right, of the genre. And so, yeah, it's not really something I particularly enjoy in an RTS, to be completely honest, because I'm more used to different kinds of gameplay. And as you can see, I'm trying to use my slingers, so my like early tier units that are a little bit faster, in conjunction with my longbowmen, using entirely ranged units, just to try it out, and just trying to scout ahead with my slingers. Although the problem is, as you can see, because of the cloud effects, the game looks awesome, by the way. Like, it's nothing particularly great, but it looks good, so that's definitely not a problem. And yeah, I'm trying to use my slingers and my archers in combination. As you can see, some enemy units move in, they get a charge off, and that's gonna pull my slingers into melee combat. I'm gonna try to retreat out of there, and just trying to put my slingers in front of the enemy units, but oh no, oh look, that's two players coming in, and the second one has a lot of cleaver infantry, so I just retreat out of there. I just decide, oh well, I'm gonna go away. And yeah, I did manage to do some damage to their units, but it's honestly not really that punishing if you damage enemy units, because you can just reinforce back at one of the villages that are at the front line. It's not like you need to retreat all the way to your headquarters to reinforce. No. Every one of those villages is a forward retreat point. Or, okay, no, that's my company of heroes coming in. Every one of these villages is a forward reinforcement point, so you can reinforce at them, and that kind of reduces the penalty that you would normally incur by just retreating back and having to reinforce. So as you can see right now, I'm flooding a massive amount of resources because I'm an idiot. But yeah, I'm gonna get some houses soon, and I'm gonna get some units. As you can see, I'm getting some upgrades, although I wasn't really able to gather if those upgrades are actually useful at all. But I mean, it's nice that, of course, they're upgrades at all. And as you can see, I can now get some Huskarls. That is my, you know, late game infantry unit, my most expensive one, and all of that. They're very, very tanky. And I'm not quite sure about the balance. Again, I've only played one game, and I don't exactly even know what factions I was facing, and I've only played the Anglo-Saxons. So right now I'm trying to also figure out how the VPs seem to work. And at some point the enemy has a pretty big advantage, and so as you can see right now, they have 3/4 of the way to the victory pretty much on their bag. But there's 3 against 3 in terms of villages, so yeah, it's not like you're gonna have an easy time winning anymore. Although one thing that's kind of weird is the way the map is designed. As you can see, one of them, although there's a fight right now, so you can see one of those VPs, or villages, sorry, just company of heroes, that F village, it's on the other side of the river, so you can only access that through the choke point bridges. And that's kind of weird because none of our villages seem to be situated behind the river. So we don't really have any natural safe villages to capture, whereas their team does. So a bit of a map balance thing. And as you can see right now, these guys are fighting in melee. looks pretty good, to be completely honest, considering the small squads and all of that. And melee versus melee is a lot longer and drawn out than ranged versus melee, which I guess makes sense. And right now I'm just kind of trying to see how the units look. And to be honest, they look pretty good. Like, to be completely honest, this is an RTS that looks quite good. So right now, as you can see, there's an exposed flank for that shield wall, and I'm trying to get behind them with my archers to fire. It seems like the most basic tactic seems to be just fix them and then get around them, which is fine, to be completely honest. Right now, I activate that guerrilla tactics. Unfortunately, the UI isn't exactly, I guess you could say, clear on whether or not... Oh, unfortunately, they retreat before I can get behind them and do some damage. Unfortunately, the UI isn't exactly clear as to if that ability is just always on or if it is a timed skill. Like, if it's gonna go away after 10 seconds or something. That's, yeah, that's something that's a little bit unfortunate. The UI still needs a little bit of work, but to be completely honest, you can understand what most things are. Like, for example, you can see all those icons. Like, you can notice what the medical tent does. It just sits down your units and heals them up. That's another thing that I don't exactly like. You can heal units on the field relatively quickly, to be completely honest. Like, it just takes a few seconds of them sitting around and then they're gonna be healed up. One thing about ranged units versus melee units is that it seems like the melee units are much stronger at dealing with enemy infantry, but the ranged units are much stronger at destroying structures. So I think that's kind of the balance that they're going for. And of course, ranged units are, well, ranged. So that's also kind of why I would like to try out 1v1, because it would force people to use different kinds of units in their army at the same time. Because right now, there's really no like incentive for most of these players to get any ranged units at all. To be completely honest, they don't seem to be that effective in fights. So you just spam out as many melee units as you can, and you try to get them to be as effective as possible, and you try to coordinate with your allies so that you can outnumber your enemies. But you don't really think about like the whole broader picture, because, well, maybe one of your allies went with a lot of ranged units. And as you can see right now, I am getting ambushed by a lot of enemy infantry. One big problem that I'm having right now is that I'm not really getting the macro game right. As you can see, these guys have so many more infantry units than I have. That is because they're also using a 2v1 kind of tactic, and so as you can see right now, my guys are just getting crushed because there's just too many enemies. And luckily for them, they have one of these units, one of these shield infantry units, I think, that prevents me from retreating. That's an ability that seems to be very, very useful. I'm not sure if any of my units as the Anglo-Saxons have that, but yeah, well done. And so they were able to wipe out my Huscarls and almost wipe out my archers. So after that, they can come in and raise my village that I had just captured. That's another thing. There aren't really a lot of ways to defend your villages if your units get forced back. So you're also reliant on your ally to defend your villages, to defend your territory. So back to the stalemate it is. That's very unfortunate. So right now I am just kind of realizing, well, if I'm gonna do this, maybe I should start to get more units, because yeah, I just only have 4 units. I think I'm like the guy with the least units on the field as a whole. Get some more Huscarls. Try to upgrade their armor and make them more tanky and all that, which is what they already do, to be completely honest. And as you can see, I activate that guerrilla tactics. Is that gonna stay on forever? Is that a mode that they go into? Is that, well, it seems like it has a cooldown, so from that you can infer that probably it's a timed skill. And yeah, it seems like, okay, it seems like it's timed because there were some like icons that disappeared from it. So yeah, after the fact, it's relatively easy to check it out, but yeah, when you're playing, it's not like you can pay attention to the little tiny icons, which is, well, another thing. The way like you can, I guess, spot how units, are upgraded or all of that it's not all that easy. Like, as you can see, the UI for the unit icons on the actual game screen, it's not really all that clear. There's some numbers, I'm not sure what they mean. There's some icons, I'm not sure what they mean. The only thing I can infer from that are the unit's HP bar and the unit's you know, type. Like, it's pretty easy to see if that's a long bowman, but I mean, it's not like that's so hard to do in any RTS ever. You just need to make the units a little bit, unit icons rather, a little bit different from each other. Which is funny because Total War does not do that these days. Anyway, yeah, you can see there's a bit of a fight. My allies are, well, smashing them. As you can see, they've managed to spam a massive amount of one type of unit. Which, it might just be because I'm a noob, but it seems like it's rather effective to spam one or two types of units and then just reduce the micromanagement that way. My ally tries to push in across the river and predictably gets massacred. But thankfully for our team, looks like our other ally is doing relatively well. I mean, he's surrounded by 2 players, but he's still just coming in and destroying them. And then I'm trying to send in my units to support, but they're taking, you know, their sweet time to walk across the map. So unfortunately, that's going to take a while. And I'm trying to send my slingers and archers to fight their infantry, you know, firing at them from the rear, hopefully dealing a lot of damage and helping out my ally and winning. But before I can do that, they retreat, which is annoying. My ally also retreats, though, which puts my archers into a bit of a bad position because, as you can see, they get rushed by these shield troops. And because I activated an ability, they get absolutely slaughtered. So that's the first time I was ever able to, I guess, stop an infantry charge with archers. And then I can shoot into the rear of those infantry units and deal quite a bit of damage. And then, of course, the enemy retreats. So that worked out fairly well for us. And what I was doing with my Huskarls in the meantime is I was trying to send them down to that F village to burn it down and capture it. I've also gotten out a catapult, but you will see. You will see. You will see. Siege units need a little bit of polish in the game, to be completely honest. I don't know what their role is supposed to be. So now my guys get up here and, oh no, traps. Oh well, who gives a damn about the traps, to be completely honest. They die, but I get the village. Then I send in my Huskarls, right? They also activate some traps, and some of them die. But then I decide, well, I mean, my Huskarls are in here, they can just take this village. That was the whole point of that initial, I guess you could say that initial decision. I sent in my archers to fight their infantry, and then I sent in my infantry to take the town. Because I thought, hey, it's undefended. But, as you can see, like, if those were archers, they would have already burned down the village. But because they're not archers, because they're infantry, oh no, they deal, like, no damage to that village. Another thing is that you can see that, like, gold band around the village health bar. That means that its defenses are upgraded to the maximum. So, yes, it might be making it a little bit harder. But as you can see, my infantry is actually losing to, like, the villagers. So it's kind of weird, to be completely honest, that the infantry just can't take the points. And now my archers that I was sending in to fire at the you know, town center, they get charged by so many infantry units. They managed to get a lot of damage off on them, but then they get pinned down, and I tried to retreat, but yeah, they're retreating through a massive swarm of enemy guys, and so 3 of my squads get wiped. So that was pretty well done by the enemies, just putting a massive amount of units between my base and my infantry units. So once again, the spam of one unit seems to triumph over, you know, trying to use different units for different purposes. I don't know, it might just be being a noob, but it just kind of seems like spamming 1 or 2 units is really king, as opposed to trying to get a diversified army. And now I'm trying to get my catapult into play, but it's just not working. Now my slingers are behind them, but unfortunately slingers don't seem to be really doing any damage. Like, as you can see, my allies' infantry is just getting swarmed. And my slingers are not helping out as much as they could. Eventually they get charged by some berserkers and predictably get slaughtered and forced back. I have my catapult over here, but it's just not getting into the action. It's just too slow. And now I'm trying to build some archers, thinking, hey, I'm also gonna do the spam 1 unit strategy, but I did it with the wrong unit. I should have done with Huskarls, to be completely honest, because I mean, if you spam archers, sure, you can do a lot of damage in your first volleys and all of that. The problem is, once they realize what is happening and they charge you, yeah, you're not gonna be able to stop them, and your archers are gonna get massacred, and then your entire blob of archers needs to retreat. That's just kind of what I was able to gather from that. And the limit for squads is 10, so it's not like you can get too big of an army because, well, the maps aren't that big, so it's probably smart that you can only get a few squads. But that just kind of reinforces my whole, this is like Dawn of War free, and one of those, I guess, RTS MOBA mix kind of games. It just reinforces that, and as you can see, my catapult gets caught by some enemy infantry, and it's gonna die. And from that point on, I'm not gonna get any more siege weapons. I know I should have supported it with ground units, and yeah, whatever.
Maintain range. To arm.
So once again, that like feeling of, oh no, this is like Dawn of War free is just oppressive. I know I'm bitching, but that's really my main gripe with the game. The way it feels. It does not feel like an RTS. It feels like a MOBA with RTS elements. And it's not exactly that cool for me. Anyway, so now my Huskarls are fighting a massively superior amount of enemy units, but I pop in a few abilities, and abilities are relatively important because, as you can see, that like lowers their morale. I think that bar up there, the gray bar above the health bar, is morale. So it's making their units fight a lot worse. And right now my Huskarls, even though they're very much like outnumbered, they're still able to hold for a long time. Unfortunately, they're not really killing anyone because they're so outnumbered, and because it seems like the Huskarls are more of a like defensive type of unit. They're strong because they're tanky, not because they kill a lot. And right now their blob moves up and tries to fight my allies' units. My slingers are over there and they can get some good shots into their backs, but unfortunately it's just not enough because these slingers don't really do any damage. So that's kind of sad. And right now I'm trying to get away from those spearmen that are chasing me, and it's not working out. Then my archers get in, and the archers do a lot of damage, but some shield guys decide to charge my archers, and combination of friendly fire and I do not know what kills most of my first archer unit. Then I pop accurate shots, and it's just a slaughter at this point because my allies' spearmen have charged the enemy in the rear. Then my archers are firing at their backs. Yeah, it's just not looking good for them, and so I can, you know, just pop in some shots as they're retreating and try to, you know, finish off as many enemies as possible. So this is a good opportunity for us to push in and capture some villages. Once again, this very much back and forth type of gameplay. Very much like a MOBA, very much like Dawn of War 3. The defenses that you can build at your villages that you capture are relatively weak, especially to ranged units. And then once I get in, as you can see, oh no, I just have my ranged units and plop, that's already 2/5 of the HP. And I can just do so much damage to it so quickly that there's no way the enemy can respond because all their units are back at base reinforcing. So at least there is a little bit of a risk reward to sending your units in. Like it's not that difficult to reinforce them. It's not that difficult to have unit preservation. So it's like relatively hard to lose your squads, but at least you're gonna lose your villages. The problem is it's perhaps a little bit too easy to lose your villages and too hard to do all those other things. Like, too hard to actually lose your units. So what ends up happening is you get into a fight, you fight, you retreat, you save maybe all of your units, maybe most of them. Then you go back to base, you replenish all of them, and you go back and you take the villages that your enemy captured from you, because those villages are so close to your base that it's much easier for you to counterattack. And then you go back to the stalemate. And that's, I guess, why the domination mode seems to work in the way it is. And the way it seems to work is that the points fall relatively quickly. As you can see right now, we have 5 villages to the enemy's 1, and we are gaining points at, well, a pretty quick rate. So if the enemy lets us, keep these points for just a little bit longer, it's not going to be good for them. But it's relatively easy for them. That's the trade-off. It's relatively easy for them to prevent this. Like, as you can see, they have reinforced their units, and now they're just coming back in, and they're massacring my ally. And it's not like there's much I can do. I'm trying to move in, but most of my units are back reinforcing, and so my allied infantry falters and dies. Partially it comes in with friendly fire, and that's sad. But then once those guys are dead, my units don't have any line of sight on their cleaver infantry. My units can't really kill them. And then here comes the other guy, and it's like, oh no. At this point, it's time to retreat. And now you're going to see a little bit of a fail in pathfinding, which is sad as hell. Like, unfortunately, my archers that were retreating end up walking into a trap, and so they die. Those other archers die. And now my Huskarls, I'm not sure what they're doing. Like, if you've been following on the minimap, my Huskarls have just been derping around. I guess the way it's worked is because of all these rocks and canyons and cliffs that make it, try to make it into a laney type environment, make it hard for people to just move around randomly. Because of this, my units sometimes, when I have a clicking disorder. I just click my units to do the same thing every time. And it's something a lot of RTS players do. But it seems like, because of slight differences in the pathing, every different time my units decided to have a different pathfinding. So they're just taking their sweet ass time to get in here. So as you can see, like, my Huskarls aren't in time to defend my archers. My archers are trying to do something, then my slingers get massacred, but the enemy units are just rushing up, and for some reason my Huskarls are coming in from the rear, and then what happened? Host has left the game. The way the game works is it's on a P2P connection, peer-to-peer. It doesn't have dedicated servers yet. It's gonna have it in the full game when it releases. Right now it's only open beta. But there's no host migration. So we lose the game because the host, or, well, I'm not sure if we lost the game, but we lose because the host is gone. So that's basically my whole shebang about the game. As it is right now, I'm not really in the mood to play it all that much more because, I don't know, it just does not really seem like it's all that deep so far. But once again, it's open beta, so take it with a grain of salt. Oh well, if you've played the game, by the way, do feel free to correct me in anything that I've been wrong, and yeah. So I want to thank you for watching, I hope you've enjoyed, and I will see you soon.